What's doing, everybody? Welcome to the channel. Appreciate you tuning in. Today we are going to talk about prison programs, prison jobs, different jobs that they have in prison. I'm sure some of you may have heard a little bit about this, but I'm going to give you a breakdown of the different jobs that are available, how it works, how you get appointed to them, what's mandatory and not mandatory. It'll give you a real comprehension of the inner workings of the prison system. And so everyone in prison gets a job. Now, the exception to that is someone who is in solitary confinement. They don't have any job. Someone like Brian Kohlberger, who is now in administrative segregation, locked in a room 23 hours a day, he doesn't get a job. But those are individuals that are not in the general population. When you're in the prison in the general population, you will get a job. Okay, so I'll explain the way, and you get one right away. You know, what happens, and you usually have two jobs. Well, let me break it down to you a little bit, right? And I'll explain what you get paid and how the entire structure of this works. They have the program committee. So when you go into prison, you will get a notification. They will deliver in the mail. When the mail call takes place, you'll get a slip of paper in the mail that says you are to report to the program committee the following day. And you go down to the program committee, and the program committee has looked at your institutional needs and requirements. And as an example, if you do not have a high school diploma, in New York State, it is mandatory that you be enrolled in GED. And so they may decide to give you GED there's three modules. There's the AM module, the PM module, and the evening module, right? So they may decide to give you GED all day, AM and PM, but they usually don't do that. What they would do is give you, it depends where there's an opening, they would give you a GED AM, and then in the PM, they will give you some type of job, okay? And I'll explain what those jobs are. When you do not have a GED, you are limited to the jobs you can get in prison, just like you're limited to the jobs you can get in the free world. Guys that have a high school diploma or an education can get various different jobs that someone can't get if they don't have a GED, you know? And so, again, let's say you didn't have a GED, they may give you GED in the morning and a porter job sweeping and mopping at night, or a porter job sweeping in the morning and then GED in the afternoon, you know? You're only going to get two modules filled with a job. You're always going to have one module of free. Not always, but there could be an exception to the rule. But there'll be one module. See, you can't go to the recreation yard if you have a program in the morning. If you have a program in the afternoon, you can't go to the recreational yard. If you have a program in the morning and the afternoon, the only time you can go to the recreational yard is in the evening. And that's what takes place for a lot of the prisoners, you know. Those, and so GED is mandatory. There are other mandatory programs as well, like a drug program, or if you have a drug related charge, they're going to put you in a drug program half a day. Let's say you have a drug related charge and you don't have a GED. You'll get GED in the morning, drug program in the afternoon, and then in the evening you can go to the yard. You know? Example like that. Let's say you have a violent crime and no GED. Violence program in the morning for the morning modular, GED for the afternoon modular, and then the yard. Now, the violence program may only be 6 weeks, 6 months even sometimes. And once that's done, you get a completion, and then you get called back to the program committee for them to give you a job in place of that. And this is, you know, part of how that works. Let me explain some of the jobs to you. One of the most popular jobs in prison is a porter spot. A porter is someone who sweeps and mops and takes out the garbage. And they need porters everywhere. You can be a company porter, which is where all the cells are. You know, there's benefits to being a porter, and there's things that aren't so good about being a porter. One of the things that's not good is a porter doesn't pay a lot of money. It may pay you $10 a week. So $20 every time you go to commissary every 2 weeks, $40 a month, and it could be give or take. Some states may pay their porters a little more, a little less, but it's not a high paying job. And they need porters everywhere. They need porters, a hospital porter, recreational porter, yard porter, gym porter, porter in the administration building. You can get a porter spot anywhere. And like I said, they sweep, mop, take out the garbage, do cleaning. But there's some benefits to being a porter too. I might as well get right into that so I don't forget. I was a porter many times in many different areas, right? I was a porter on my company. And what I mean by my company, or what's also called a gallery, is where all the cells are. And the benefit of being a porter is that when the other prisoners are locked in, you are outside of the cell. Your cell door stays open, so you could come in and out of your cell. That's really good benefit. You're doing the sweeping and mopping, right? And the prisoners who are locked in their cells are not just going to allow any prisoner to be a porter, because a porter can make moves. And what I mean by make moves is a porter can move drugs around. A porter can get extra food, right? And so the prisoners don't want someone to be a porter if they think he's a snitch, if they think he's a rat, because the porter is going to have access to the officer as the other prisoners are locked in. So the prisoners want a porter that they can trust. You know what I mean? They don't want anyone out there running around. Let's say I'm the porter and my man in the cell says, "Yo, listen, I got a gram of dope. Do me a favor, Fish. Bring it down to the guy in dirty cell." No problem. You know what I mean? So now I'm not just working as a mule either, like a sucker. He's going to take care of me for making this move. I take it, I bring it down to his buddy down there. When he hits me off with a little something, might hit me off with a little bit of that product. He might hit me off with a couple of honey buns. You know what I mean? Porters have access to move from company to company, which is not really allowed, to go to different floors. Guys cook meals in their cell. They're cooking food in their cell. He cooks 3 bowls for his 3 buddies. Yo, do me a favor, Fish. Bring this one to 14 cell. Bring this one to 10 cell. Bring this one. And so the porter has access to move around. But they have to be able to trust the porter. They have to be able to trust the porter. He's not going to tell the cop anything. They have to be able to trust the porter that he can move things around. Now, the cop is going to pick the porter, right? And the program committee will appoint you as a porter, right? But if the prisoners don't like you, they'll tell the cop, "Yo, we don't want this dude out there." You know what I mean? And they'll get rid of you. They're not going to make you a porter. The officer only wants a porter who knows how to move smart, because, as they say, SHIT rolls downhill, right? And the officer don't want to hear anything from the sergeants or the lieutenants. He don't want to hear any, right? So he just wants a porter that knows how to keep things quiet. The officer knows the porter is moving stuff around. As long as he does it smart, he doesn't attract attention, then, that's the way it flows. Right. So I was the porter for years in Attica. You know what I mean? And the porter needs to be able to deal with the officer and deal with the prisoners. You know what I mean? And make no waves on either end. Right. And, one of the guys in the cell might want to take a shower. "Yo, Fish, could you go tell the cop I need an extra shower, man? Really good." I got to be able to go to the office and say, "Listen, do me a favor. The guy in 14 cell needs a shower. Please do me a favor, hook him up." And as long as everything's smooth, boom, everything runs smooth. I was also the water guy for a few years. And what the water guy is similar to a porter, but there's no hot water in the cells in the maximum security prisons. We're talking about maximum security prison. There's no hot water in the cells. And guys may come in from the yard at night. They come in 9:30 at night. They're not allowed to take a shower. They want a bucket of hot water in their cell so they could wash up. Right? And so what they do is, when they're leaving for the yard, they leave a bucket, a wash bin, right by the bars of their cell. And what I would do is fill up a big cart right? That had like 20, 30 buckets on it. I would go to the slop sink, fill them with hot water, and then I would fill everybody that left a bucket on their cell, fill it up with hot water. This when they come in and they wash themselves up with the water, and they dump the water down the toilet, down the sink when they're done washing up. You got to be able to take a bird bath. It's part of prison, especially in the max prison when you're only getting 2, 3 showers a week. But a porter can shower every day. That's one of the benefits of being a porter. You can shower every day. There are jobs that give you a shower every day. If you work around food, you're allowed to have a shower every day if you work in the mess hall. So I don't want to get stuck too long on the porter thing, but that's one of the jobs that's in there. Doesn't pay a lot, has some good benefits to be able to move around, and that's the other one. You have the yard porter. You can be a porter outside in the recreational yard. There's benefits to that as well. It doesn't pay a lot, but you get out to the recreational yard 30 minutes before the population, and if you're a guy that likes to work out, that means you can go into the yard, take out the garbage real quick, do what you got to do, and start your workout and get your workout in before the general population comes out there, because a lot of guys run right to the weight pile and try and take all the weights for them and their crew. You know what I mean? So it's nice to be a yard porter and get out early and get your workout in. Or you can go out to the yard as a yard porter and set the weights up in your area. Not all of them. You don't take them all. You take what you need. And then when the population comes outside, the 2, 3 guys that you work out with, they come over. You got everything set up already. So yard porter is a good benefit for doing that. But you got to shovel snow as a yard porter. You got to take out the garbage. There's things that you have to do, right? Then there's, as I said, there's programs, mandatory programs. One of them in New York State Prison is called ART, Anger Replacement Training. The other one is called ASAT, Alcohol Substance Abuse Training, right? And those are mandatory programs. As I said, if you have a violence program, you got to take ART, Anger Replacement Program. If you have a drug charge, you have to take ASAT, Alcohol Substance Abuse, and you can get a job teaching one of those things, right? And it's basically it pays a little more. That may pay you $15 a week, $30 every 2 weeks, $60 a month. May even pay a little more than that. It may pay 20, 18, 19, $20 every week, something like that. And this is where the other prisoners will come in and you hand out the packets to them and you kind of run the class. It really is a scam. I got into that because the state hires civilians from the street to teach those programs to the prisoners, right? But the civilians don't want to show up, so they pay the prisoner pennies to go teach it. And these things are mandatory for your release. These programs are mandatory for your release, and they have a prisoner teaching these programs that doesn't know anything. That's a whole nother scam about the farce of prison program. But I'm just saying, instead of getting into that right now, those are some of the jobs you can get. An instructor, you can get an instructor's job. In order for the ASAT or the ART teaching job, you must have a GED, and you do have to go to a few classes to learn about what you're going to be teaching the men. But basically, the men are in these programs writing love letters to their girlfriend, falling asleep on the desk, doing drugs off of the desk. It's all nonsense, right? And the state is getting, 20, $30 million a year to run this program, to have this program in the prison. And really, prisoners are running the program and nobody's learning anything. It's really a joke. They have a lot of vocational programs. If you can't prove that you had employment on the street, it is mandatory that you take a vocational program. So you may get AM Porter, PM Vocational, AM GED, PM Vocational, and some people get evening jobs, but not too many. It really depends. So they have as vocational, radio and television repair. I was in radio and television repair. You go in there, you're not learning anything. They got a little circuit board in front of you. They're showing you how to solder pieces in front of the circuit board. It's another thing where the state is getting tons of money from the federal government to have this program in the prison, and it's really not going to benefit the prisoner at all when he steps out of prison. The programming inside of the prison really, really needs to be changed. It is really a scam, but you can get a vocational program. radio and television repair, masonry, custodial maintenance, where you learn how to wax floors and strip floors, woodworking shops. Some of them you could learn a little bit of stuff in. But even if you really, really apply yourself, the civilians that are running those programs really don't even care what you do in there. But like I said, that's a whole nother topic. We're just talking about the programs now. They have paint gang. I was on the paint gang for a little while. I had a lot of jobs. I was in there for 17 years. The paint gang is there's things that need to be painted inside of the prison. Not a bad job because you don't work all the time. You're not doing it every day. They really only call you when they need you. So you could, let's say you have AM, PM paint gang. Let's say you completed all your mandatory programs, right? And now, they call you to the program committee. They basically ask you, what do you want? Because I did my drug program. I did my violence program. I have my GED. I'm vocational satisfied. And because I've had years in prison already, I've done everything they wanted me to do or that's mandatory. They basically ask you, what job do you want? And if they have the opening, they give you a job. I tell them, listen, I want the paint gang. So you get put on the paint gang. They really don't use you every day. So now I can it's like a no-show job. I can go to the yard in the morning. I can go to the yard in the afternoon. I can go to the yard 3 times a day if I want. And if they need you, they call you over the loudspeaker. Paint gang, report to the OIC. OIC is the officer in charge. Paint gang report, and they may have you paint cells. Cells need to be painted. Hallways need to be painted. Classrooms need to be painted, especially if like the bigwigs in Albany, New York are coming down to do an inspection next month. Then they'll have the paint gang start cleaning up the prison. So that's another job, the paint gang. They have no-show jobs. They have plenty of no-show jobs. In Sing Sing, one of the no-show jobs was the steam crew. People that clean the steam pipes with the brush and wipe the dust off of the steam pipes. They're not doing that. It's a no-show job, but they have to give people jobs. You have industries in some prisons, like Attica had the metal shop. This is a big business for the Department of Corrections. It's a multi-million-dollar business. But what they do is they make chairs, they make desks, they make tables, they make lockers, they make stuff out of metal, and then they sell it to companies in society. They pay the prisoners slave labor. Metal shop is a better paying job. With metal shop now, you're talking you could earn $40 a week, $50 a week. That's a couple of $100 a month. And for a guy that doesn't have any support on the street, right? That helps a lot with your commissary, with your packages. In order to get a metal shop job, you have to have satisfied all the mandatory programs. You have to have a GED. You have to have your drug program done. You have to have your violence program done. For the most part. There's always little exceptions to the rule. They may give you metal shop in the afternoon, and then GED in the morning. But I don't think that really takes place. I think in order to be in the metal shop, you have to have a GED. It works different in different places, right? That's also a lot of where the weapons come out of is the metal shop because they're welding in there. They're cutting metal in there. Of course, they walk through metal detectors when they go into work. They walk through metal detectors when they come out of work. But when there's a will, there's a way. There's always ways to get stuff out of there. When I was in Wallkill prison, I was in the optical program. The optical program is where you're actually making lenses for eyeglasses. You're packing frames, eyeglass frames, and they're getting sent to eye doctors on the street. They're getting sent to eyeglass stores on the street. And you have to learn that. I was in the optics program. The optics program was the highest paying job I ever had. Every 2 weeks, I could earn $100. With a little overtime, I could get $120. So you're talking $240 a month, $250 a month to work in the optical program. That was there's only one prison in New York State that has that, and that was Wallkill Correctional Facility. So I was in the optical program there for a while. Of course, for that program, you have to be satisfied. You have to have your education. You have to have completed all your other programs. They had masonry, where you could learn to lay bricks. That was another scam, that program. The civilian that was running the masonry program and never laid a brick in his life. He didn't care what the prison is down there. But then the prison was able to say to the state, we have this program. give us 20 million a year to run this program. You know what I mean? And then they have a civilian sitting there reading the newspaper. Guys aren't learning anything. If anything, they learn the real basics, but they're not going to learn the trade enough to survive in the free world. You know, you can be a porter in the hospital. The hospital needs porters. You know, you could be cut hair and work in the barbershop. You know, you can be a clerk. The offices need clerks. I would never want to be a clerk because that requires working around the officer very closely. You know, working around a bunch of officers very closely, out of the earshot of all the other prisoners, where you leave your cell and you go to where the offices and sit there with the officers and do their work, do typing work, do paperwork, you know, file records. I personally never wanted a clerk job. I didn't want to be a clerk. You know, but I know some very good clerks. I know guys that were good clerks. You know, they weren't rats, they weren't snitches, and they worked around the offices. But they can always be a questionable job. You know, so I didn't want to be a clerk. Another one of the big one where they like to stick people when they come into prison is the mess hall. People work in the mess hall. You need dishwashers. You need cooks. You need porters. You need people to sweep and mop. You need people to serve the food, servers. So the mess hall employs a big percentage of the population. You may have 50 guys, 60 guys in the morning that work in the mess hall, 50, 60 guys in the afternoon. You could have evening mess hall. Of course, they have to have evening. The commissary, I worked in the commissary for a while. I was robbing and blind when I worked in the commissary. I found a way to load up bags and pass them out of there. This way I could save a ton of money on the commissary. You know, hey, listen, officers were robbing the commissary too. You know, commissary is run by a civilian. You know, you could work in the draft room. The draft room is when prisoners get off the bus and they're coming into the prison. You unload the bus for the bags. You bring them upstairs. You unload the bags onto the table. This way the officer can go through them. The draft room is a great job. Wherever prison I've ever been to, the draft room is a great job. Because, right, the officers, when new prisoners come in and they pour their contents on the table from the prison that they came to, the officer says, you can't have that here. You can't have this here. And the officer's taking all this stuff away from the prison that he's not allowed to have. And I was able to get that stuff back to the prison. You know what I mean? Even because I had the relationship with the officer or working with him, I said, come on, let him have that. What's the big deal? Why do you take that fan away from him? You know, because in one prison you could have an 8-inch fan, in this prison you could have a 6-inch fan. Come on, let him have it. You know what I mean? The officer, all right, all right, all right. You know, so the draft room was good because you're really lounging out, you eat good, you have an area that you hang out in, and only when the buses come in do you work, you unload the buses. And then when guys are getting sent out of the prison, they come down, you help them pack up their stuff. You also get access to see who's coming into the prison. You get a list every day to see who's coming. You get a list to see who's leaving the next day or two. So that was nice. You can inform guys, yo, listen, they got you on the move. They're going to move you. You know, so that was good too. You have the state shop where they give out clothes to people. You know, you get your prison issued clothes. You work in the state shop every 6 months. You're allowed 6 pairs of socks, 6 pairs of underwear. You know, every year you're allowed 2 new uniforms, the green uniforms. And you work in the state shop, filing, handing out clothes, even doing a little sewing. They have guys that are seamstress in there that work in the state shop, right? So there's plenty. I didn't name them all. There's plenty of different jobs in there. Everyone has a job. I made it to the point where, and a lot of prisoners make it to the point where you get so much time in prison that I basically just ended up getting no-show jobs, you know, because this way you want to be able to do what you want to do with your time. And with the no-show job, I could sit in my cell in the morning and I can study psychology. I could work on the youth program. I could type my letters. And then in the afternoon, I could go out and play handball or you know, stay in the cell and study theology some more. And at night, the same thing, go out and work out, play handball or stay. It gives you the opportunity to do what you want to do. You know what I mean? It gives you a little bit of freedom, you know, once you've completed all your mandatory programs. So any questions about programs, let me know. I'll break it down. I'll explain it to you. And that was just a little idea about the way prison programs work. I'll see you at prison jobs work. I'll see you guys later. Take care.